Activate Your Introvert, the weekly show to help leaders build performance by understanding introversion. In this week's show, Leadership Tip of the Week, Helping Introverts' Energy Levels. A discussion with Lauren Sergi. Lauren is a public speaking and communication skills expert, and we have a debate about that infamous public speaking myth, as well as why Lauren thinks every manager and leader should be good at public speaking. Question of the week: how can you engage introverts in conversation more easily? And introvert myth of the week: all introverts are the same. Just before speaking to Lauren, the big news of the week in the UK is probably all about petrol, or rather, no petrol, except we're assured there is plenty of petrol, and we've just bought too much in a short period of time. Petrol, of course, is all about energy. When there's plenty of petrol at the petrol station, it works incredibly well. As the station starts to run low, the petrol station works, but not properly. Some pumps are okay, others not. Then when it's run out, there's nothing coming out at all until it's recharged. If the petrol is sold more quickly than it can be topped up, there's a problem. Okay, you're really bored of hearing about the UK's petrol problems. Let's convert that to introversion. Here's the petrol station guide to introversion. For introverts, spending time with people is like petrol leaving the station. It can go at different rates, but once it's gone, it's gone. An introvert needs to spend time quietly, alone, to top up. Without that, they're not much use. What does that mean for you as a leader? Understanding is a great starting place. Knowing that your introverted team member can enjoy, and probably does enjoy, spending time with people, but will need to manage their energy, can really help. Too much socialising, and when I say socialising, I also include work discussions, work interactions with people, can create an introvert hangover. A few years ago, I used to run a whole day event for professional speakers every single month. And on the Sunday, I'd feel hungover, just because of all the amazing people I'd spent time with and how de-energized I was. So ask the introvert how you can help them. Listen to the answer and summarize it back, proving you've heard, and possibly prompting some more information to come out. Many introverts find taking quiet breaks between heavy people sessions makes a huge difference. A day off after a conference allows recovery, but above all, don't panic. They're not out of petrol. What would you like to know about introversion in business? This week's question builds, I think, from the episode a couple of weeks ago when I spoke about questions you could ask an introvert. Jean asked me, how can you engage introverts in conversation more easily, especially your quieter team members? Introverts tend not to like random conversations, so help to structure it some more. It'll help them to engage with it. You might just need to give a simple summary and then ask what they think. Number 2, don't interrupt. It's very likely to close down an introvert. Instead, let them finish, summarise what they said, and ask an open question about it. Number 3, don't then ignore their conversation. Number 3, don't then ignore their contribution or just talk across it. That's like saying their view is pointless. And for many introverts, if they think that what they're going to say is pointless, they won't say it. Number 4, ask for the help. Perhaps helping them create a couple of relevant and structured questions for a team meeting. So in advance, planning and talking about it with them. This will help an introvert see the purpose of their contribution. And number 5, in the meeting, make them feel heard, perhaps by summarising their point after they've made it. All of those will help you to draw the introverts in your team into discussion, especially in team meetings. What question would you like answered on the show? Whether you want to be on the show or just have your question answered like Jean, go to activateyourintrovert.co.uk. There's a box there for you to ask your question. You could also follow on Facebook. Discuss the answers at the show's page. Activate Your Introvert. I look forward to seeing your comments. And, of course, there's a particular introvert myth you'd like explored, even exploded, or issue that stops you getting the most from the quieter people in your team, let me know. The mission of this show is to help you understand introversion and build your business. But now it's time to talk to Lauren. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's brilliant to talk to you. We're going to talk a lot about public speaking, obviously. I have no doubt we'll end up talking a bit about remote speaking and whether the whole Zoom phenomenon of the last 18 months has affected speakers and how that all impacts introverts. Just before we get into that, first question for you. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? And probably more importantly, what's it mean to you?
I classify myself as an introvert, but most people assume the opposite because of the way that I communicate. I'm a very emotive communicator and I love public speaking, but I need a lot of time to recharge after something like that. And that I find is what being an introvert means to me, is that you require a lot of processing time within interactions, and you do spend quite a bit of time thinking about your experience, the other people's experience. You spend time chewing over different social interactions. And very often also what we really need is time to rest, recuperate, and recharge our batteries before going back into big social engagements again.
I like the point you made about emotive and how some people assume because you display emotions when you're speaking, I guess, they assume you're an extrovert for that.
Yeah, it's a common misconception.
Why do you think that so many people believe public speaking is something introverts do not do?
I think that it's because they believe that introverts are afraid of the audience, of having to speak and engage with a lot of people. And conversely, they assume that that all extroverts love it. But that's not the case at all. Really, the experience of public speaking, I find, whether an introvert loves it or an extrovert is terrified of it, is more about whether or not they see the audience as a threat to them, and basically how they see their whole interaction and the reason and the purpose for their interaction with the audience. So many introverts see an audience and they say, I am here to do this thing for them. And they focus totally on that thing they are doing for the audience. And then it's a very easy interaction. They're super focused on the purpose. They have a good sense of control of the situation, and they can speak beautifully and very empathetically, usually.
As opposed to some extroverts who can stand up there and just start talking because they like talking.
Because they like talking and they're not necessarily paying attention to the audience and what the audience needs. And they're kind of running an adrenaline high of being up there in front of people. Other extroverts simply get overwhelmed by, oh, there's so much going on. Oh no. And then your brain shuts down. And the same thing can happen with introverts in public speaking. So that perception of what it is you're there for, how it is you relate to the audience, is much more important to the skill of public speaking than whether you're an introvert or an extrovert.
For me, and certainly when I go on stage, it's what do I want the audience to gain as a result of listening?
Yep, that's the whole purpose. That's everything is for the audience.
Why do you think public speaking is an important leadership skill?
Leaders are responsible for getting clear messages out, not only to the people that they lead, but also for anyone who might be a stakeholder in the business, which includes clients, of course. And without that ability to give good messages that are clearly targeted towards, but also inclusive of different audiences, the leader starts to shoot themselves in the foot because they can't get their point across to anyone. As people increase in their level of seniority and their level of responsibility, the communication skills need gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it almost becomes their primary job, is to be good at speaking to people.
The further up the organisation you go, the less you are, shall we say, doing, as you might be at the bottom of the organisation, and the more you are talking to people.
Yeah.
Importantly, that's not just running big meetings, that's clients as well.
It's everyone. So you have to be able to talk to lots of different people. What do the customers, what do the clients need and want to hear from you? What do your employees need and want to hear? How do you need to express it to the extroverted ones? How do you need to adjust your approach, very often is what it is, for your more introverted employees. And you need to sort of be able to switch between communication modes to accommodate these different people.
Quite an interesting one. I think we'll come back to that in a moment, because you just said that you have to, or may have to, adjust your speaking style when you're talking to introverts. But so I do want to park that one, because I'm going to ask you a bit more about that later. But do you see that introverts are more hesitant as speakers?
I don't find that that's the case. I think that once you give them a chance, and once they get a taste for it, the ones who find they like public speaking, boom, the hesitation is all there. And what they become really focused on is, I need to share this message. I'm not a party person, but how can I share this message? And then they tend to dig into the craft, the real craft of public speaking. What I do find is that many introverts have been told, and have told themselves, that because I'm an introvert, I'm not a natural public speaker. And that's kind of the little messed up message that so many of us give ourselves, that we need to get past. And the way to get past it is to give it a try.
The point you made just there was fascinating, which is, actually, it's really obvious when I think of it like this. Introverts might not all be amazing party people, but what has being on a stage and speaking got to do with being in a party?
Nothing.
Nothing at all.
Nothing. I hate house parties. I collapse on myself at parties and receptions afterwards. I'm like, no.
Absolutely, yeah.
Put me in a corner. I'll answer questions, but don't make me go out there. But you stick me in front of a group and on a stage, and boom, I'm here to share a message.
I always remember my first big speaking gigs. There's, I don't know, a couple of thousand people in the audience. Great, loved it. Came off stage, had to go and talk to a few people in the bar. Nervous as hell at that.
Yeah.
That bit was the bit I hated. But anyway, one of the other things that's happened in the last 18 months is that we've all gone to Zoom or Teams or whatever.
We have.
How's that affected stuff?
Oh my goodness. Well, first up, I think that it's made a lot of companies realize that this is, depending on what your business is, of course, for many companies, this is actually a sustainable way of working that they never considered in the past, which can accommodate many more employees than they thought possible, and accommodate for various reasons, whatever the accommodation might be for. But it's also, I believe, made people realize that the needs of employees aren't just whether they want to be in an office with a lot of people or want to be at home in their own space. It's that this mode of communicating, remote communication, is a skill set unto itself, and it is tiring. So it's not as easy. Communicating with people isn't as easy as turning on your webcam, and they thought it would be. And they're left with this big question: why is everyone so burned out?
And it's not just introverts or extroverts that are burned out. We are all struggling with it. Yeah.
We are, because an introvert does not mean a hermit. First up, like, there's this notion that we don't want to be around people. No, far from it. It's more about how many people at a time and for how many hours a day. And so introverts can definitely feel just as isolated when they're working from home in extended situations as extroverts can. Maybe they have a preference towards one or the other, but you can't be on your own all the time. Human beings are inherently social creatures. Like we live in groups, down to the most fundamental aspect.
Absolutely.
Some people might be very content to be at home in their remote office for 8 hours a day for weeks on end, but at some point they're going to need interaction. And the other thing that we didn't realize, especially at the beginning, is that virtual communication is still interaction. And it is difficult interaction at that, because the performance aspect of it, the whole technological environment of Zoom, means that you have to perform and behave differently in front of the camera for us to pick up on social clues and social nuances. So for introverts, this layers a lot of stuff onto it. They have to perform, which might make many of them uncomfortable. They need to very often put additional thought and awareness into the expressions, the gesture, making the eye contact, which for everyone across the board, introverts and extroverts, is quite tiring. And they also have people in their space, in their personal space, for in many cases, hours and hours and hours a day. So you can start to feel really exposed. If you're spending, as many of my clients do, between 5 and 8 hours a day in virtual meetings and in Zoom, guess what? You have no time to yourself to think and recharge your batteries, which introverts need. We need processing time.
And I guess extroverts aren't winning from it either, because they're not getting the buzz of being with the people.
Exactly.
Interesting.
It's a wonderful technology, but it has its limitations, and it can be very taxing to use.
We're coming to the end, going to run out of time shortly, because I always end up with a tip for an introvert about how to improve their public speaking.
My favorite tips for introverts is to focus on the reason why you are speaking to people. What is the message you're trying to share? What is the outcome you're trying to achieve? Because when you look at that, suddenly it's not the number of people that's in front of you that's important. It's the purpose. It's what it is you're trying to do. And introverts are really good at figuring out the minutia of communication. Knowing that goal and that outcome lets you say, okay, well, if people need to get this thing, then I need to see this from me, and I need to involve this kind of expression into my performance. And they can really knit together a very, very deep, well thought out public speech that puts them in control and makes them more comfortable.
If I'm an extrovert and I want to communicate not just to other extroverts, but also introverts, should I change my style? And if so, how?
This gets a bit dicey, and my main recommendation for extroverts is to avoid hard sells. Extroverts can be emotive, they can be outgoing, they can be their warm, welcoming, social self in front of introverts. Many introverts really like that because the extrovert can do all the hard work for them. I love it when I'm with chatty people because I can just let them talk. But where you get a lot of pushback from introverts is if you go for the really hard sell. You start forcing your ideas on them. You say, you got to make a decision now. You got to do this right now. Just go ahead, just do it, just jump in, because that works against the introvert's need for introspection and their appreciation of time to digest and process and come to a decision about something. So for extroverts, be emotive, be social and out there, but don't push yourself. Do not try the hard sell approach. You will turn those introverts off almost immediately.
Fantastic tip. Thank you. Lauren, I'm sure that many of the listeners will want to get back in touch with you. How can they do that?
Easiest way is to head to my website at laurensergy.com. It's spelled LAURENSERGY.com.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And now it's time for Introvert Myth of the Week. Those crazy stories that I hear and you hear that some people actually believe. This week's myth: all introverts are the same. No. That's like saying all extroverts are the same. And I'm sure you wouldn't say that either. But I tend to focus on introversion and extroversion as I'm a pretty simple person. An introvert/extrovert is a much simpler framework than one with 16 different types of people around it, but can help you get lots of benefit. So I'm not in any way saying that all of the other frameworks are not so useful. I'm just saying I tend to focus on a simpler one. Because I'm certainly not claiming that all introverts are the same. MBTI, for example, is a personality profiling system that gives 8 different types of introverts. Other people will claim there's 4 different types: social, thinking, anxious and restrained. And I'm not saying that they're wrong at all. We could break it down in any number of ways. How would you like to subcategorize introversion? But most importantly, would the extra work give you enough benefits to make it worthwhile? And if it does, do it. Starting to focus on understanding the introvert-extrovert difference, I think, can help reap big benefits. It's a great place to start with a simple understanding. It opens conversations, gets more from your team meetings, increases productivity, unlocks activity from people that don't currently engage, and can help people develop themselves. If we can increase profits and build people, that's got to be a good thing. Next week, I hope we have far more petrol in the petrol stations, and we will have a brilliant interview with returning star Colin Newlin, talking about the future of work.
I'm John Baker. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful. There's a new episode every Thursday at activateyourintrovert.co.uk and your favourite podcast provider. Till then, Go be introversial, activating your introverts, building your business.